Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News.
Right. The year 2019 was a very promising year for businessmen and women in Nigeria, especially small and medium-scale enterprises, normally known as SMEs.
As we approach the year 2020, Nigeria's economy projection is likely to be very favorable to business owners who apply basic business principles in their transactions.
Well, joining us now is Ayo Bankole Akintujoye, a strategy expert and convener Lagos SME Bootcamp. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Before we talk about the future, 2020, let's talk about the year 2019. How would you describe the economic growth of Nigeria? There were fears. Some people said, this tepid growth may just be leading to a recession, but thankfully we saw the figures picking up. Are we out of the troubled waters for good? What's your take?
Yeah, I think that we're out of the troubled waters, but I don't know if it's for good. I think that we still need to do more to stimulate growth, and I think that we should. There's a lot to be hopeful for, especially with the proposal of the finance bill. I expect that it's going to stimulate a lot of economic activities, especially in the SME space, and then that would even further jack up GDP growth rate. But if we don't, do what needs to be done, we may still be just a click away from another recession, especially in the light of our dependence on crude oil, which hasn't changed much, and then the fact that we're still gagging businesses, especially the startups that are in the country.
How are we gagging them?
Charges. These charges left and right, over-regulation. What happens is that when you are in an emerging economy that requires a lot of economic activities, you relax regulation a bit. Okay. As a matter of fact, you waive taxes, and you bring in a lot of initiatives that will encourage.
Done in the finance bill.
That's why I said that.
So a lot of people are saying the bill is a giveaway.
No. So I already mentioned that if the bill passes, is going to help.
It's going to come on stream 1st of January 2020.
Yes, it's going to help stimulate a lot of things, right? But then we're discussing 2018, what has happened so far, right? 2019. So what has happened? But we expect that a lot of those things will change. But don't forget that the finance bill may not necessarily change how regulators behave. I don't know if you get my point.
How do regulators behave?
You see, to get anything out of the regulators, is harder for a donkey to pass through the eye of a needle. It's very difficult. Our processes are mundane. They are cumbersome. There's a lot of corruption. You have to pay tips at every point in time. I'm saying this because I've done regulatory consulting, so this is not ESA, right? You essentially have to put in money in every folder. So these things are very... corruption is not just at the center. Political corruption. There's a lot of administrative corruption that gags people who are ready to do serious business, especially the small and medium scale enterprises.
Okay, so I want to talk about the ease of doing business. We recently went up on the ranking on the Doing Business 2020 index from 146 to 131. However, critics still argue that we still have a lot of anti-business policies. Do you think at this point it's a place to relax and be happy that we have moved up on the ranks, or we should still keep trying to tote that line?
Definitely not. I'm not one of those who get excited with a few notches up. Why? Because, again, it goes back to what I'm saying, that I believe that we moved up because it's documented that we've done some things, right? We've made some efforts, right? We've automated registration. We did some reforms with immigration. But nobody has taken time to do proper impact assessment of those things.
Who should be responsible for impact assessments?
So I won't say it's the government. The government should appoint, or the sponsors of every project or initiative should appoint independent bodies that ensure that they assess the impacts in terms of, I'm talking about the impacts in the real economy, in the real sector, for those who are in the extractive economy, in the extractive segment of the economy, those who are in the creative arts, those who are in the technology space. How is it impacting them versus how it was before. So if you look at the real impact, right, business, if you go to the street and ask businessmen, right, they will tell you that they haven't seen more changes, because even look at the things that we did with immigration, for example. The fact that we could even get visa on arrival was a whole lot of applause, right, across the world. But it was stopped, right? Even when it was being won, government says it is X amount, but in actual terms, if you want to get one, it's so difficult. I got one then, and I know, that I didn't pay the amount. So it's some of these things you begin to ask yourself. So I'll give you another example, right? The CAC registration can now be done online. You can now fact-check names and all of that. But in the real sense of the word, if you're still going to get out your approval as quickly as you want it, you still have to engage somebody in Abuja. You still have to pay between 80 to 100,000 naira. So we need to really check how well are these things working. Yes, the guys who are going to rank us will look at those initiatives. They will, push us up. And don't forget that we pushed up the notch does not mean that we've done fantastically so well. We are still far, at the bottom of the pyramid. So there's a whole lot more to do. And I really am a big advocate for real impact assessment of government
on the real
projects.
economy.
Yes.
So there has to be impact assessment on the real economy. That's taking. Let's look at the numbers, possibly for next year. It's projected we're going to do 2.5% growth. If we do 2.5% growth, that's still a scratch in the pan. Consider the fact that we're growing at 3%. The population growth vis-a-vis the economic growth, there is a big mismatch. Looking at 2020 for small businesses, an economy that despite everything and every activity of the company will still grow like 2.5%, how can business people, make good returns in an economy that the growth is still going to be stifled?
Well, so there are two ways to this, right? First and foremost is that business activities within the micro and medium space or SME space are contributors to growth, right?
Oh, definitely.
And because a large chunk of them play in the informal economy, a lot of these growth projections are done outside of those activities. But if you drive some policies changes that encourages increased activity there, you can even surpass your growth forecast. Do you understand? So
what are these policies?
So that brings us back to finance bill. So at the SME Bootcamp, we've worked with over 300 SMEs. We've supported with capital raising and all of that. And you know that 9 out of 10 SMEs are said to fail before, or startups are said to fail before 5 years of existence, right? And what are the biggest causes of failure? One of it is funding, right? Another one is regulatory issues, right? Now, most of the SMEs who are in the informal space and who fail, one major reason why they fail is regulation, right? And one major reason why they are not in the formal net in terms of taxes, in terms of registration and all that, is because of the processes of registration. But the finance bill would really help, right? One, we are waiving VAT, right? Filing and all that for those who are micro businesses. VAT compliance alone in Nigeria is hell for small businesses, right? Let's say you make less than 10, 20, 30 million a year, right?
25 million is the threshold. 25 million.
Yes, 25 million. So,
yeah.
Okay, so I'll get to that. So you're making, let's say 20 million, 10 million micro businesses, right? And you have to, every month, you have to, of course, invoice for your VAT. Then you have to go to the VAT office and file physically, even if you don't make a sale. These things are difficult for them, right? Even the registration, they have to pay, and all of that. But we're waiving all of that, right, for the micro businesses. Fantastic. So businesses will no longer be scared to register, to open bank accounts, right? They will be more interested in being transparent because nobody's withholding them. CIT, we've also cut CIT, right? For minimum tax now will be waived for those below 25 million. Then for those between 25 to 100 million, it will be limited to 0.5%. Excellent, right? But there's a challenge with that. It's now going to be limited to 0.5% of turnover. Now, turnover is different from revenue, especially for those in the micro space. Yeah. So I have 100 naira that I'm using to trade, right? I use my 100 naira to buy 100 newspapers. I sell the 100 newspapers, right? My revenue is not 120 naira. That's my turnover, right? So I'm going to pay you 0.5%, meaning you are going to be eating into my
profit line and
my
line
capital line.
And capital line.
You understand? So we still need to look at that. When we make all of these regulations, you are not really working with the guys on the street, so you don't really understand. I think that 0.5% should be gross profit, right?
Okay.
Yes, so that you don't touch, by capital, which is always very small.
But why did you write a recommendation? I mean, the law says it's subject for review every year. So somebody would think, with the work you do in consulting, you could be advocates. Write a recommendation to this effect, because we're all part of the democracy.
No, yeah, we have written.
And have you followed it up?
So we are working on a paper, right, that collates signatures and sends, right?
Okay.
But we've already put out literature documents in the public space that speaks to some of the things that we feel are holes and, that should be improved. But of course, there's now the formal side of it, which is collating signature of SME owners and sending, to. But again, I really don't see how much inputs can have now, because it's already is far.
No, this one will pass, but we're saying for 2021.
Oh, you mean for 2021?
And why don't you use consultative groups like SMEDA and like NASME and the like,
yes,
to be able to push this?
So that's the whole idea. Well, if you want to get things faster, if you want to get things done fast, just do it on your own. Collate signatures, send, right? If you want to go through SMEDA and all these guys, they have their own processes, they have their own agenda, it's harder. I mean, it's just...
What is wrong with their processes?
Nothing is wrong with their processes. I'm just saying they have
SMEs?
their own processes, right? They have their own agenda, they have their own... So you're just going to join the entire group, right? But you have other interest groups. Once you have about 100 signatures, they're going to attend to the National Assembly.
Let's talk about factors that will be propelling growth for the Nigerian economy in 2020. We've talked so much about 2019, but we'll go on a quick break now and we'll return to talk about the projections for Nigeria's economy and small-scale businesses when we return with Ayo Bankole, Akintujoye. Stay with us. It's great to have you back, everyone. You're still watching the Morning Show here on the Rise News and continuing the conversation on the future of SMEs next year and the Nigerian economy in general. Mr. Akintujoye, strategy expert and convener Lagos Bootcamp, is still here with us. Thank you so much for staying with us. And I was going to ask you, because, the state of industry and manufacturing offers little optimism at the time, at present. We all know one major factor is power, electricity. But there seems to be a renewed focus on diversifying the economy. I don't know what your take is on that, because a lot of people will say agriculture is the next silver bullet, but really, is it? What are the sectors that are propelling the Nigerian economy for you in 2020 that the government is not focusing on at the moment and that we should be focusing on?
Infrastructure, power. So you see, Karl Marx talks about the base structure and the superstructure, right? Infrastructure is the base upon which the economic superstructure sits. You can go all over the world on investment forum and all that. You don't have security, you don't have power. Some people are never going to come here for tourism, for example. Nobody's going to bring their money. A lot of people will not still bring their money. So you can't have GE, for example, coming in here. Most of the biggest investment banks are not here. Why? Because what's the size of your economy, right, with relative to the transactions that they do? I mean, what roads are their cars going to apply? Those kind of things, right? So you need to fix power, right? We're not yet ready with power. You need to fix infrastructure. You need to fix your healthcare, right? You look at the budget's provisions for all of these things. It's ridiculous. In fact, we've reduced what's it called now? We've reduced budget allocation for capital projects from last year. So, look, agriculture, I tell people that agriculture, ideally, the type of agriculture that we are still hammering on is not the agriculture of the future, really. We need to be looking at midstream agriculture, processing, right? You still have, yes, you are making rice in Kano. But then, simple numbers, from the time when, all the time when we banned importation of rice, right? The numbers of rice importation in Benin Republic shot up, right? But we're deceiving ourselves that we're rice sufficient because we're importing from Benin Republic, right? Now, you've closed the border, but you haven't solved the major real issues affecting that industry, right? Where is the infrastructure for agriculture to thrive? So even if you increase production, farming activities, right? How about the midstream? How do I distribute? A large chunk, about 30% of their produce gets damaged before it even gets to the market, right? How do they store? How do they process? So all of these things are dependent heavily on infrastructure. The average farmer cannot afford the type of power requirements that it will need for him to do large-scale storage. So he's never going to be able to scale. I don't know if you're following me. So those are the real issues. Now, look at...
The government said just signed a 22,000 megawatt distribution deal with Siemens. Recently, the African Development Bank has given the government over 900 million for power projects. We just secured another loan for 3 billion on power projects. I mean, they'll tell you that all of this is gearing towards that level of penetration as regards providing power and infrastructure.
They will tell that to people who are less economic or historically aware. I mean, this is not the first time we're signing partnerships or signing deals.
So you're saying it can't work this time?
I'm not saying it can't work. I'm saying I've not seen the political will that says things will change. I mean, it's still...
What do you mean by see the political will?
Okay, so this government is not new, right? So there was a lot of hope 4 years ago, right? We've been 4 years down the line. There are some fundamental political and regulatory changes that need to happen that would make you see the body language of the government.
Like what? How do we see the body language of government?
Okay, so, so I'll give you an example, right? You still have the government controlling a large chunk of the transmission activities, right? That is a huge problem. So
the government controls transmission entirely.
Exactly. I mean, it's totally ridiculous. Now,
why is it ridiculous?
Because government shouldn't even be in the business of power, right? Now, let's even leave government intervention. Let's look at the model itself, right? Why should I not be able to generate power for our ICE TV and sell the rest to those within this environment? Why do I have to connect to the national grid? And then the national grid makes a waste of a large chunk of the power that I've generated. I mean, come on. No businessman is going to bring their money here to come and invest in a business where why do I have to do that? Why do I have to? It doesn't make business sense. I don't know if you're following me. So it discourages investors who want to really do proper power generation. I can put a bet on the table. We're going to come back here, review what has happened with Siemens or whatever loan they are getting. You know, I told you about economic impact assessment. We've been borrowing money for years. Who is monitoring the impact of those funds down the chain? So that's what we're talking about. It's not just about, I've done strategic project monitoring exercises for several governments in this country. And I'm telling you that I know that the biggest problem is in the midstream implementation point. So the governor or whoever is in charge is so keen on it, he raises the money, let's go and implement.
So you're saying that ICPC report is really poignant and, explanatory of what really goes on?
Of course. Well, I don't trust our ICPC, FCC, all these guys. They're trying their best. But that report, for me, is a good one, right? But then, there are lots of things that happen that even they either don't see or look away from. Okay, just go to the immigration office. Sit down for your passport. Don't know any immigration officer. Apply online. Wait for immigration to call you. If you've ever applied for American visa, American passport, compared with the Nigerian process, you would understand what I'm talking about. That is corruption, live corruption. Look at the Ministry of Labour, for example. You ask yourself, what are they doing in the Ministry of Labour on a daily basis? What do they do there? Because you have a lot of labour laws, you have a lot of things going on. So you need to ask all of those things, that what exactly is the impact of what we want to do in the real sector of the economy in terms of how does corruption come in, how do you monitor whatever initiatives down the chain.
But I'm sure it's not all gloom. It's not all gloom because we do also know that the CFTA will be coming on board next year. the impact of that for small businesses in Nigeria as well. Well, Mr. Akintujoye, stay with us. We do hear there's a protest on climate change in Lagos, and there you have live pictures, climate strike, March, Nigeria. This is a global thing at the moment, guys.
Oh, yeah, this is a global thing on the heels of the climate change summit that will be coming up again in Madrid. I mean, this has been a protest around the world. Greta Thunberg has led this. In fact, I think there's a coordinated strike action all over the world. In Australia, as of this morning, numerous school students were out on the strike action, calling government to be able to go back to the agreement of COP in Paris and to be able to, cut carbon emissions, probably leading up very close to pre-industrial times. There's lots and lots of talk about the climate warming up, despite what is happening all around the world. And these actions are pretty much replica of what is happening around the world. So let's also see proceedings as it goes on in Madrid in the course of the weekend and see resolutions reached.
Indeed.
Yes, definitely.
Mr. Akintujoye, I was just going to ask you about the potentials of the AFCFTA for next year, the impact on small businesses.
Okay, so you see, you can only benefit largely from the ACFTA if you are a production economy. Right. So for small businesses, if they are able to scale up to the point where they can export, right, fantastic. But a large chunk of them will not be able to export, right? So as a matter of fact, SMEs are only responsible for about, I think, 9% now, of total exports, right? So even though they contribute like 48% to our GDP. So, I mean, really, I don't see how they will benefit so much. Maybe those who also import, can have that benefit. But then our internal policies are also, you begin to wonder, are we confused? So, for example, you just signed ACFTA and then you are closing the border. So you begin to wonder. And that's why it took us so long to sign, because we know that we're not a production economy. So most likely we would benefit from the import leg. And then on the export leg, maybe not so much. So I'm not really on that side. But as you said, it's not all gloom, really. There are quite a number of things that may lead to a jack-up of activities within the SME space in 2020.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
That brings us to the end of the show. I am Adesola Omoruan.
I'm Rafal Sydney.
And I am Shaiton Atigari. Thank you for watching. From our entire team here in Lagos, enjoy the rest of your morning and, of course, the rest of your weekend. Thank God it's Friday.